A routine traffic stop, a speeding nurse, and a shocking revelation that changes everything. When Officer Declan Malone pulls over a car, he never expects to find his long-lost son in the passenger seat. But that's just the beginning of a story filled with secrets, danger, and a fight for family. Stay tuned, this one's unforgettable. The night was quiet, the highway stretching into the distance, illuminated only by the dim glow of streetlights and the occasional headlights of passing cars. Officer Declan Malone sat in his patrol car, his fingers tapping idly against the steering wheel. It had been an uneventful shift so far, just a few minor traffic violations, a routine noise complaint. But years on the force had taught him that quiet nights could turn unpredictable in a heartbeat. Then, it happened. A blur of motion in his peripheral vision. A car, moving too fast, weaving slightly as it sped down the road. His radar gun beeped, 85 miles per hour in a 55 zone. No hesitation. Declan flipped on his lights, pulled onto the road, and accelerated. The siren wailed through the night as he gained on the speeding vehicle. The driver didn't try to run, didn't hesitate. The car slowed, then pulled over to the shoulder. Declan parked behind it, his hand resting instinctively on the holster of his gun as he stepped out. Every traffic stop was an unknown, some drivers were apologetic, some were aggressive. Others had secrets they were desperate to keep. He approached the driver's side cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Inside, he saw a young woman in medical scrubs gripping the wheel tightly. Her knuckles were white, her breathing uneven. There was something in her eyes, not just fear of a ticket, but something deeper. Something bordering on desperation. Before he could speak, she turned to him, her voice trembling. "Officer, please." Declan's eyes flicked past her to the passenger seat, and his breath caught in his throat. Sitting there, staring back at him with wide, shocked eyes, was a boy. His boy. Tobias. The name escaped his lips before he could even process it. The 12-year-old blinked, his mouth slightly open, as if struggling to find words. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. "Dad?" For the first time in years, Declan felt his pulse skip. His heart pounded in his chest. This was impossible. He hadn't seen his son since the bitter custody battle that had torn their family apart. His ex-wife had moved away, taking Tobias with her, cutting off all contact. The courts had sided with her, and Declan had been left with nothing but old photographs and unanswered letters. But now, here he was. In a car with a woman Declan had never met, in the middle of the night, on a highway where he had no reason to be. Declan took a slow, controlled breath, forcing himself to stay calm. His training kicked in, overriding the storm of emotions threatening to consume him. "Step out of the car," he said, his voice steady but firm. "Both of you." The woman hesitated, gripping the wheel tighter. "Please," she whispered. "I can explain." Declan narrowed his eyes. His mind was racing. Why was Tobias here? Who was this woman? And what the hell had happened to bring his son back into his life like this? One thing was certain. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. The cold night air wrapped around Declan as the woman hesitantly stepped out of the car, followed closely by Tobias. The boy looked up at him, his face pale in the dim light of the street lamp overhead. Declan's mind was spinning, but he kept his expression neutral. Years on the force had taught him how to control his emotions, but this was something he had never prepared for. The woman, tall, with tired eyes and auburn hair pulled into a messy ponytail, kept her hands visible, as if she knew he was still assessing the situation. "I need you to tell me what's going on," Declan said, his voice calm but firm. He turned to Tobias, his gaze searching. "Are you okay?" The boy nodded slowly, but there was something off in his posture, something hesitant. Declan shifted his attention back to the woman. "Who are you?" She swallowed hard before answering. "My name is Savannah Grayson." I'm a nurse. She exhaled shakily. I have custody of Tobias. Declan's jaw clenched. Custody. That word felt like a slap to the face. The last time he had tried to fight for Tobias, he had been denied at every turn. His ex-wife, Laura, had made sure of it. The judge had ruled against him, and then, nothing. No contact, no updates. Just silence. How? His voice came out sharper than intended. Where is Laura? Savannah's face changed. The exhaustion in her eyes deepened, and for the first time, Declan noticed how drained she looked, like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear. She's gone, Savannah said quietly. She died in a car accident 3 days ago. The world tilted. Declan felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His hands tensed at his sides, fingers curling into fists before he forced them to relax. His ex-wife was dead. Tobias's mother was gone. He turned to his son, but the boy was looking down, his fingers twisting into the hem of his hoodie. Declan could see the way his shoulders trembled, the way he was trying to stay strong, but failing. The last time Declan had seen his son, Tobias had been a little boy, barely 8 years old, still clutching a stuffed dinosaur at night, still laughing at knock-knock jokes. But this Tobias, he was taller, thinner, and his face held shadows that shouldn't be there. He looked older than 12. He looked like he had been forced to grow up too fast. Declan exhaled slowly and turned back to Savannah. Why didn't anyone tell me? His voice was tight, controlled, but there was an edge to it. She hesitated. Laura left instructions. She didn't want you involved. Another hit. Another punch to the gut. Are you kidding me? His tone was sharper now, anger simmering beneath the surface. She cut me out of his life for years, and then she dies, and I don't even get a damn phone call. Savannah flinched but held her ground. I wanted to call you. She looked at Tobias, then back at Declan. But I was afraid. I didn't know if you'd even want to see him after all this time. Declan scoffed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. He's my son. Of course, I wanted to see him. His gaze flicked to Tobias again, and the boy looked up just in time for their eyes to meet. There was something unspoken there, something raw and broken. Savannah took a deep breath. I was granted temporary guardianship until the court decides what happens next. But... She hesitated. Tobias didn't want to wait. He begged me to bring him to you. Declan's heart clenched. Is that true? He asked his son. Tobias bit his lip, then nodded. I just wanted to see you, Dad. His voice was small, almost fragile. I didn't know if you'd still want me. Something cracked inside Declan. Hey, he said, kneeling in front of his son. Of course, I want you. I never stopped. Tobias's chin wobbled, and for a second, Declan thought the boy might cry. But instead, he just nodded again, his eyes shining under the streetlights. Savannah cleared her throat. Look, I know this is a lot, but we should talk somewhere else. Not on the side of the highway. Declan stood up, his mind still racing. She was right. This wasn't the place for this conversation. Fine, he said. Follow me. He turned back to his patrol car, but not before glancing at Tobias one last time. His son had come back to him. But something told him this was just the beginning. Declan drove in silence, his hands gripping the wheel tightly as he led Savannah's car down the empty streets. His mind was a storm, memories of the past clashing with the reality of the present. His son, Tobias, was sitting in the back seat of the nurse's car behind him, alive and breathing, yet feeling like a ghost from a life that had been ripped away from him years ago. 15 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of a small diner on the outskirts of town. It was late, nearly midnight, and only a few cars were scattered in the lot. The neon sign flickered weakly, casting a dull glow onto the pavement. It wasn't the best place for a conversation like this, but it was private enough. Savannah parked next to him, and when she and Tobias stepped out of the car, Declan finally got a good look at his son. He was taller than Declan remembered, lanky, with messy brown hair that had grown too long. His hoodie was too big, and his jeans looked worn out. Declan couldn't shake the feeling that Tobias hadn't been taken care of the way he should have been. "Come on," Declan said, leading them inside. The diner was nearly empty. A tired-looking waitress barely glanced up as they slid into a booth in the corner. Tobias sat next to Savannah, while Declan sat across from them, studying the boy, searching for pieces of the child he had lost. Savannah hesitated before speaking. "I know this is overwhelming." Declan let out a hollow laugh, rubbing a hand over his face. "Overwhelming? That doesn't even begin to cover it. My ex-wife dies, I find out my son's been living with a stranger, and nobody thought to call me. And now, you're sitting here telling me that I don't have custody of my own kid." He looked at Tobias. "That about sum it up." Tobias shrank back slightly, his fingers gripping the edge of his hoodie sleeve. Savannah shot Declan a warning glance. "I'm not your enemy," she said evenly. "I didn't make the rules. I did what I was told when the court granted me temporary guardianship." Declan leaned forward, his eyes hard. "And you just accepted that? You didn't think maybe, just maybe, I had a right to know?" Savannah exhaled, folding her hands on the table. "You don't understand how this all happened. Laura and I weren't close, but she was my half-sister. I didn't even know about Tobias until a year ago. She never mentioned him to me before that." Declan's stomach twisted. "You're telling me my ex had family I didn't even know about?" Savannah nodded. "She kept secrets, Declan. From everyone. Even me." He sat back, shaking his head. The woman he had once loved, the mother of his child, had been a master at control. Even in death, she had found a way to keep him in the dark. Savannah sighed. "When Laura died, Tobias had no one else. I stepped in because I thought it was the right thing to do." Declan looked at his son. "Is that what you wanted?" Tobias shifted uncomfortably. "I just wanted to be with someone who cared," he mumbled. Declan's chest tightened. "You think I didn't care?" Tobias hesitated. "I don't know what to think anymore." The words cut deep, but Declan couldn't blame him. Tobias had been taken away when he was too young to understand. He had probably been fed lies for years. The waitress came over, setting down a few menus. Declan barely glanced at his before looking back at Savannah. "I'm getting him back," he said firmly. "I don't care what the court says. He's my son, and he belongs with me." Savannah met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Then you're going to have to prove it." Declan frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Savannah leaned forward slightly. "It means that the courts won't just hand him over to you. You're a cop, Declan. Your job is dangerous. You live alone. And you haven't been in his life for 4 years. That wasn't my choice." Declan snapped. "I know that," Savannah said gently. "But the system doesn't care. If you want Tobias back, you're going to have to fight for him." Declan felt a slow, burning rage crawl through him. He had already lost so much. He wasn't going to lose his son again. "I'll fight," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll do whatever it takes." Tobias looked up at him then, hope flickering in his tired eyes. It was the first time that night that Declan saw something he recognized. His son still wanted him. And he would never let him go again. The tension at the diner lingered long after the food arrived. Declan barely touched his coffee, his appetite non-existent despite the long shift. Tobias played with the hem of his sleeve, his head down as if he wanted to disappear. Savannah, sitting stiffly beside him, kept her hands wrapped around her mug, her knuckles white from the pressure. Declan still couldn't wrap his head around everything. Laura had kept their son from him, and even in death, she had left him another obstacle. His gaze flicked to Savannah. She had stepped into Tobias's life after barely knowing him, and now she had more legal rights to his own son than he did. It made his blood boil. He pushed his plate aside and exhaled sharply. "You said I have to prove myself. How exactly do you expect me to do that?" Savannah sighed and finally met his gaze. "The courts will look at everything, your job, your living situation, your ability to provide stability. They'll also look at the fact that you've had no contact with Tobias for years." "That wasn't my choice," Declan said, his voice rough with frustration. "I know that," Savannah said, her voice softer now. "But the law doesn't see it that way. Right now, on paper, I'm the one Tobias has been living with. The system doesn't like sudden changes, especially for a child who's already been through trauma." Declan ran a hand over his face, trying to rein in his frustration. "So what? I'm just supposed to stand back and let a judge decide whether or not I get to be a father?" Savannah hesitated. "Not exactly. You need to show them that you can give Tobias what he needs, a home, stability, a life that won't be disrupted by the risks of your job." Declan narrowed his eyes. "And you don't think I can?" Savannah's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know you, Declan. And from what I've heard, you throw yourself into your work. The courts don't care about what's fair. They care about what's easiest for the child." Declan scoffed. "And you think staying with you is the best option?" Savannah flinched at the sharpness in his tone but didn't back down. "I don't know if it is. But I do know Tobias needs someone who won't disappear on him." Declan clenched his jaw. "I didn't disappear. I was forced out." Savannah sighed, glancing at Tobias. The boy was staring at the table, his hands clenched into fists. She reached out to touch his arm gently. "Tobias, honey, why don't you go grab a milkshake from the counter?" she suggested, her voice softer now. Tobias hesitated, glancing between them before nodding. He slid out of the booth and walked toward the counter, giving Declan and Savannah a moment alone. As soon as he was out of earshot, Savannah leaned in. "You think I don't want you to be in his life?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Declan stiffened. "I think I shouldn't have to fight for something that should have been mine all along." Savannah exhaled sharply. "You're angry. I get that. But this isn't about us. This is about Tobias. And right now, he's confused, scared, and unsure of where he belongs." Declan swallowed the lump in his throat. He hated admitting it, but she was right. Tobias had lost his mother, been uprooted from everything familiar, and was now being pulled between two people who barely knew each other. Savannah's voice softened. "I don't want to be your enemy, Declan. I don't want to take him away from you. But I need to know that you're really ready for this." Declan met her gaze, his fists tightening under the table. "I am." She studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Then prove it." Declan didn't blink. "Tell me what I need to do." Savannah hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "You need to show the court that you can provide a safe, stable home. That means a structured life, time with Tobias, and proof that you're willing to put him first, even if it means making sacrifices." Declan's stomach twisted. He knew what she was implying. His job. "You're saying I should leave the force," he said flatly. Savannah hesitated before shaking her head. "I'm saying that right now, your life revolves around your job. If you want to fight for Tobias, you have to prove that he comes first. Judges don't like single parents with dangerous jobs. If you get called into a shootout tomorrow, who's going to take care of him?" Declan's chest felt tight. His job was all he had known for the past 20 years. It had given him purpose, structure, hell, it had been the only thing keeping him from spiraling after losing Tobias. And now, it was the very thing standing between him and getting his son back. Tobias returned then, setting his milkshake on the table. He glanced between them cautiously, as if sensing the tension. Declan forced himself to relax, to push the weight of the conversation aside. He wasn't going to make his son feel like a burden. Instead, he looked at Tobias and managed a small smile. "That milkshake any good?" Tobias shrugged, taking a sip through the straw. "It's okay." Declan nodded. "Good. 'Cause next time, we'll go somewhere that makes them even better." Tobias looked up at him, something uncertain flickering in his eyes. "Next time?" Declan held his gaze, his voice steady. "Yeah. Next time." He might not have all the answers yet, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going to let his son go again. The night air outside the diner was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain. Declan walked Savannah and Tobias to her car, his mind still racing with everything they had discussed. Tobias kept his hands buried in his hoodie pocket, his posture tense. He looked tired, exhausted, really, and Declan hated that there was nothing he could do to take that weight off his son's shoulders. Savannah unlocked the car, but before Tobias could climb in, Declan gently touched his shoulder. The boy turned, looking up at him with wary eyes. "Hey," Declan said, his voice softer now. "You want to come over tomorrow? Just for a little while?" Tobias hesitated, glancing at Savannah as if searching for an answer. Declan's heart squeezed at the thought that his son wasn't sure if it was okay to say yes. Savannah gave a small nod. "It's up to you, kiddo." Tobias shifted on his feet before finally nodding. "Yeah. Okay." Declan felt something tighten in his throat. "Good. I'll pick you up after school." Tobias nodded again, but there was still something uncertain in his eyes. He climbed into the passenger seat, closing the door softly behind him. Savannah lingered outside for a moment, looking at Declan with something unreadable in her expression. "You should know," she said quietly, "Tobias has been having a hard time since Laura died. He doesn't talk about it much, but I can see it eating away at him." Declan clenched his jaw. He wanted to say of course he's struggling, his whole life was upended, but instead, he just nodded. "He's a good kid," Savannah continued, watching him carefully. "He needs you, but he also needs time to trust you again." Declan's chest ached. Time. That was the one thing he had already lost too much of. "I won't let him down," he said firmly. Savannah studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "I hope not." She got into the car, and a few seconds later, the engine rumbled to life. Declan stepped back, watching as the car disappeared down the road. Only when they were completely out of sight did he finally let out the breath he had been holding. Declan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat on his couch, staring at the stack of old letters he had written to Tobias over the years. Letters that had never been sent. The words felt hollow now, written to a child who had probably believed his father had abandoned him. He picked up the top letter, dated 2 years ago. "Hey, buddy. I don't know if you'll ever get this, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. I miss you every day. I hope you're doing okay in school. I hope you're happy. One day, I'm gonna find a way back to you. I promise." The promise sat heavy on his chest. He had meant every word. Now, he finally had the chance to make good on it. The next afternoon, Declan arrived at Savannah's house right on time. The neighborhood wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly great either. It was one of those areas where everything felt temporary, where people were just passing through, waiting for something better. Savannah's house was small but neat. The front yard was mostly dirt, with a few patches of struggling grass. Declan climbed the steps and knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened, and Tobias stood there, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked surprised, as if he hadn't fully believed Declan would show up. "You ready?" Declan asked, forcing himself to keep it casual. Tobias nodded, stepping outside. "Yeah." Savannah appeared behind him, her gaze flicking between them. "Be back by 7, okay?" Declan gave her a small nod before leading Tobias toward the truck. They climbed in, and for the first few minutes of the drive, silence filled the space between them. Declan cleared his throat. "You hungry?" Tobias shrugged. "I guess." Declan smirked. "That's a yes. Burgers sound good?" Tobias glanced at him, almost suspiciously, before nodding. "Yeah. Burgers are good." Declan drove them to a small diner downtown, not the same one from the night before, but another place he liked. It was a little run down, but the food was good, and he knew the owner. They sat in a booth by the window, and after ordering, Declan leaned forward slightly. "So, how's school?" Tobias made a face. "It's fine. Just fine." The boy shrugged. "I don't really talk to a lot of people." Declan frowned. "You don't have any friends?" Tobias shifted uncomfortably. "I used to, back where we lived before. But when we moved, it was kinda hard to make new ones." Declan's gut twisted. Of course. Another thing his son had lost. "You'll make some," he said, hoping it was true. "You're a smart kid." Tobias picked at the edge of the napkin on the table. "I don't really feel like one." Declan exhaled slowly. He wasn't good at this, at figuring out the right words. But he knew one thing, Tobias needed to know he wasn't alone. "Hey," Declan said. "You know, when I was your age, I moved around a lot too. My dad was in the military, so we were never in one place for long. It sucked, always being the new kid." Tobias looked up. "Yeah. Yeah. But you know what helped?" Tobias shook his head. "Finding something that felt like mine. A hobby, a sport, something I could do no matter where we ended up." Tobias was quiet for a moment, then mumbled, "I like drawing." Declan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah. You any good?" Tobias shrugged. "I dunno. Maybe." Declan smirked. "Well, maybe you can show me sometime." Tobias hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." Their food arrived, and for the first time, the tension between them eased. Declan watched as Tobias actually ate, his shoulders relaxing just a little. It wasn't much. But it was a start. The ride back to Savannah's house was quieter than before, but the silence felt different this time. Not tense, not uncomfortable, just settled. Declan stole a glance at Tobias, who sat with his head resting against the window, his fingers idly tracing patterns on the glass. The boy looked tired, but for the first time, there was something softer in his posture, something less guarded. Declan wanted to keep this moment, to hold on to the fragile connection they had started building. But deep down, he knew that earning Tobias's trust wasn't going to happen overnight. When they pulled up in front of Savannah's house, Declan put the truck in park but didn't kill the engine. "You want me to walk you in?" he asked. Tobias shook his head, already reaching for the door handle. "I got it." Declan nodded, gripping the wheel a little tighter. "All right. I'll see you soon, okay?" Tobias hesitated for just a second before nodding. "Yeah. See you." Declan watched as his son climbed out of the truck, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Savannah opened the front door before Tobias even had a chance to knock, her gaze flicking to Declan before she ushered the boy inside. She didn't say anything, but her expression was thoughtful, as if she was reassessing everything she had assumed about him. Then the door closed, and Declan was alone again. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. One step at a time. Later that night, Declan sat in his apartment, flipping through paperwork from his lawyer, Harrison Lowe. The man had been blunt when they last spoke: getting full custody of Tobias wasn't going to be easy. The courts didn't favor single parents with high-risk jobs, and even though Savannah had only been in Tobias's life for a short time, she was legally recognized as his guardian. "You need to prove stability," Harrison had told him. "Judges don't like disruptions, and right now, you're the unknown factor." Stability. Declan leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His entire life revolved around his job. He worked long hours, irregular shifts, and there were nights when he barely made it home before dawn. That wasn't stability. He had spent years throwing himself into the job because it was the only thing he had left. But now, looking at the papers in front of him, he knew he had a choice to make. If he wanted to fight for Tobias, something had to change. A few nights later, Declan was halfway through a shift when the call came in. "Unit 217, we've got a break-in reported at Savannah Grayson's residence. Possible forced entry. Responding officers en route." Declan's blood ran cold. He didn't wait for backup. Didn't even think. He slammed the patrol car into gear and sped through the darkened streets, sirens blaring. Savannah's house was only a few miles away, but it felt like the longest drive of his life. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios, the thought of Tobias in danger making his chest tighten like a vice. By the time he skidded to a stop in front of the house, his adrenaline was already surging. The front door was open, hanging slightly off its hinges. No lights inside. No movement. Gun drawn, Declan moved fast, his heart hammering. "Police," he called out. "Savannah. Tobias." A scuffling sound came from the back of the house. Declan followed it, rounding the corner just in time to see a dark figure slipping out the back door. Without hesitation, he took off after him. "Stop. Police." The suspect bolted down the alleyway behind the house, but Declan was faster. He tackled the guy to the ground, pinning him before twisting his arm behind his back. The man let out a grunt of pain, thrashing beneath him. "Who the hell are you?" Declan growled, yanking the guy's hood down. The man was in his late 40s, greasy hair, bloodshot eyes. Declan didn't recognize him, but there was something unsettling about the way the guy smirked. "Just saying hello," he rasped. "Tell Savannah I'll be back." Declan's grip tightened. He was still cuffing the guy when the other officers arrived. His partner, Officer Kieran Holt, jogged up, his flashlight sweeping the scene. "You all right?" Holt asked. "Yeah," Declan muttered, shoving the suspect toward him. "Get him processed." Only then did Declan rush back to the house. Inside, he found Savannah sitting on the couch, shaking, her hands gripping a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Tobias was next to her, his eyes wide and unblinking. Declan crouched in front of them. "Are you hurt?" Savannah shook her head. He didn't get inside. He was trying to pry open the back door when Tobias heard him. "We locked ourselves in my room and called 911. Declan let out a slow breath, trying to calm the fire in his chest. He turned to Tobias, searching his son's face for any signs of fear. "You okay, buddy?" Tobias nodded but didn't speak. His hands were clenched into fists in his lap. Savannah finally looked up at him. "Who was he?" "I don't know," Declan admitted. "But he knew your name. That means this wasn't random." Savannah paled. Declan sat back, his mind working quickly. If this guy wasn't a stranger, then Savannah might have enemies she hadn't told him about. And now, Tobias was caught in the middle. Declan clenched his jaw. He wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. He was fighting to keep his son safe. The morning after the break-in, Declan sat at his kitchen table, barely touching his coffee. His phone sat next to him, the screen dark, but his mind was wide awake, racing through everything that had happened the night before. A man had broken into Savannah's house. He had known her name. He had gotten close, too close. And Tobias had been inside when it happened. That fact alone made Declan's blood boil. He had spent years enforcing the law, chasing down criminals, putting his life on the line. But nothing, had ever terrified him like the thought of his son being in danger. His phone vibrated, breaking his thoughts. He grabbed it and saw Savannah's name on the screen. "Yeah," he answered immediately. "Hey," she said, her voice a little steadier than it had been last night. "Tobias just left for school. He seems off. Quiet. More than usual." Declan exhaled. "He went through something terrifying, Savannah. That's normal." "I know," she said. "But I think there's more to it." She hesitated. "He won't talk about it. I thought maybe you could try." Declan ran a hand through his hair. "I'll pick him up after school. See if I can get him to open up." Savannah sighed, and for the first time, there was no trace of defensiveness in her voice. "Thank you." Declan hung up and stood. He had another call to make before he dealt with Tobias. An hour later, he was sitting in his lawyer's office. Harrison Lowe was an older man, sharp-eyed, with the kind of no-nonsense attitude that made him a damn good attorney. Declan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Someone broke into Savannah's house last night. Tobias was inside when it happened." Harrison's expression barely changed. "That won't affect your custody case, unless the judge believes Savannah's home is unsafe." Declan's hands clenched. "It is unsafe." Harrison nodded slowly. "Then use that." Declan frowned. "What?" "You need to show the court that you provide a better home," Harrison said. "Safer. More stable. If this happens again, it could work in your favor." "I don't care about the damn custody case right now," Declan snapped. "I care about my son being in danger." Harrison exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "Then do something about it." Declan stared at him for a long moment, then stood up. He already knew what he had to do. When Tobias climbed into the passenger seat after school, Declan could tell right away that something was wrong. The kid barely mumbled a greeting before staring out the window, shoulders hunched. Declan drove in silence for a few minutes before finally speaking. "You know, when I was younger, my house got broken into once." Tobias glanced at him, surprised. "Really?" "Yeah," Declan said. "I was about your age. It was the middle of the night, and I remember lying in bed, hearing footsteps downstairs. I felt helpless." Tobias swallowed hard. "What happened?" "My dad was in the military. He had a gun. He scared the guy off before anything bad could happen." Declan tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. "But I still slept with a baseball bat under my bed for months after that." Tobias was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, he whispered, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if the guy got inside." Declan's chest ached. "I know," he said. "But he didn't. And I'm not gonna let anything happen to you, okay?" Tobias hesitated. "You can't be there all the time." Declan gripped the wheel tighter. He wanted to be. But Tobias was right, his job made that impossible. Unless. He took a slow breath. "How would you feel about moving in with me?" Tobias blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "I mean it," Declan said. "I want you to live with me. Not just for a night. For good." Tobias stared at him, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "But, what about Savannah?" "You'd still see her," Declan assured him. "But you'd have your own room. A place that's yours." Tobias bit his lip. "What if the court doesn't let you?" Declan exhaled. Then I'll fight. Tobias looked down, his fingers fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. I don't want people fighting over me. Declan's heart clenched. We're not fighting over you, kid. We're fighting for you. Tobias hesitated. I don't know. Declan nodded. You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. Tobias nodded slowly, still looking uncertain. But Declan could tell, he wanted this. And that meant Declan wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The courtroom smelled of old wood and paper, the kind of scent that clung to places where decisions were made, where lives were changed with the stroke of a judge's pen. Declan sat at the plaintiff's table, his fingers laced together to keep them from shaking. Across from him, Savannah sat with Tobias, her expression unreadable. Tobias looked small in the oversized chair, his hands folded in his lap, his gaze darting between the adults as if waiting for the verdict that would determine his future. Declan's lawyer, Harrison Lowe, adjusted his tie and leaned in. Stay calm, he murmured. Let me do the talking. Declan nodded, though staying calm was easier said than done. His entire life had been leading to this moment, to this fight. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an air of authority, cleared her throat. We're here today to determine the custody of Tobias Malone, currently under the temporary guardianship of Ms. Savannah Grayson. Officer Declan Malone has petitioned for full custody. We will hear arguments from both sides. Savannah's lawyer stood first. He was a stiff, formal man, the kind who lived by rules and technicalities. Your Honor, Ms. Grayson has been the sole guardian of Tobias since his mother's passing. She has provided him with a stable home, a routine, and emotional support. Officer Malone, while Tobias's biological father, has been absent for years. We argue that a sudden shift in guardianship could be detrimental to the child's well-being. Declan gritted his teeth. He wanted to argue, wanted to shout that it hadn't been his choice to be absent. But Harrison placed a firm hand on his arm, stopping him from speaking out of turn. Then it was Harrison's turn to stand. Your Honor, my client was denied access to his son due to legal roadblocks and the wishes of his late ex-wife. However, he has never stopped trying to be in Tobias's life. Furthermore, recent events have proven that Ms. Grayson's home is not the safest place for Tobias. Savannah stiffened, her gaze darkening. The judge raised an eyebrow. Elaborate. Harrison nodded. A man broke into Ms. Grayson's home just last week, knowing her by name. He posed a direct threat to both her and Tobias. If Officer Malone had not intervened, we could be discussing an entirely different outcome today. Savannah's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. That was an isolated incident. That's speculation, Harrison countered. What's not speculation is that my client, Officer Malone, has a stable home, a steady career, and a deep desire to provide for his son. The judge turned to Savannah. Ms. Grayson, do you believe Tobias would be safer with his father? Savannah hesitated. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, slowly, she turned to Tobias. What do you want? Declan held his breath. Tobias looked down at his hands, his fingers twisting in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear. I want to live with my dad. Declan felt the air rush from his lungs. The judge nodded, making a note in front of her. Then I see no reason to delay a decision. Custody is hereby awarded to Officer Declan Malone, with Ms. Grayson maintaining visitation rights. The gavel struck. It was done. Declan sat on the front steps of his house that evening, staring out at the quiet street. Tobias's things were already inside, his backpack, his sketchbooks, the few clothes he had brought over. The weight of what had just happened was still settling over him. The door creaked open, and Tobias stepped out, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. So, this is home now? Declan nodded. Yeah. It is. Tobias glanced around the yard. It's quieter than I'm used to. You'll get used to it, Declan said, giving him a small smile. And if you don't, we can make some noise. Tobias smirked a little. Can I paint my room? Declan chuckled. Yeah, kid. You can paint it however you want. They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them lighter than it had been in weeks. Then Tobias exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. I really thought you didn't want me. Declan's heart clenched. He turned, looking his son in the eye. I never didn't want you. Not for a single second. Tobias swallowed hard, and for the first time, he leaned into Declan, resting his head against his father's shoulder. Declan wrapped an arm around him, holding him close. This was what he had fought for. And for the first time in years, everything felt right. This story is about more than just a custody battle, it's about redemption, resilience, and the power of second chances. Declan wasn't a perfect father, not because he didn't want to be, but because life and circumstances robbed him of the opportunity. Tobias wasn't just a lost child, he was a boy searching for belonging, for a place to call home. And Savannah, though she entered his life under unexpected circumstances, wasn't an enemy, she was another person trying to do the right thing in a world full of uncertainties. The heart of this story lies in the idea that family isn't just about blood, it's about the choices we make, the sacrifices we're willing to endure, and the battles we fight for the people we love. Declan had to prove, not just to the court but to Tobias himself, that he was here to stay. And Tobias, in turn, had to find the courage to trust again, to believe that his father wasn't another person who would let him down. The ending isn't about winning, it's about healing. Declan and Tobias didn't just become father and son again overnight. Their bond had been fractured by years of separation, by misunderstandings and pain. But by choosing each other, by taking that first step toward rebuilding what was lost, they set themselves on a path toward something stronger. This isn't a story about loss. It's a story about homecoming. And in the end, no matter how difficult the journey was, Tobias finally found his home.